Picture this, a man so rich that his vacation wrecks the economy of an entire region. Not because he burned cities or blockaded trade, because he gave away too much money. In the summer of 1324, a caravan emerged from the western horizon and rolled toward Cairo. At its center rode a king from a land most Egyptians barely knew existed. His people called him Mansa Musa. To us, he's sometimes called the richest human being in recorded history. Ahead of him marched slaves with staffs of solid gold. Behind him plodded camels loaded with sacks of gold dust so heavy their backs sagged. Around him, tens of thousands of people moved like a mobile city across the desert, wrapped in bright Persian silk that shimmered against the sand. By the time this caravan left Egypt, the price of gold had crashed. The purchasing power of lords and merchants collapsed. Markets seized. For over a decade, people in Cairo told the same story whenever prices came up. It was that black king from the west, the one who flooded us with gold. According to one witness, they spent gold until they depressed its value in Egypt and caused its price to fall. This is the only time in history we know of where one man's personal spending spree destabilized an entire regional economy. And the strangest part? He wasn't trying to conquer anyone. He was trying to please God, show generosity, and put his kingdom on the map. Why should anyone today care about a king who rode camels through the desert 700 years ago? Because Mansa Musa ran into a problem our world still struggles with. What happens when wealth is so concentrated, so overwhelming, that even generosity can destabilize everything around it? We're used to a modern story. Governments print money, currencies lose value, people panic. That's inflation, 21st century style. In 1324, the opposite happened. Musa didn't print paper promises. He carried actual gold, tons of it, into a system built on that same metal. Instead of a shortage of value, Cairo suddenly had too much. Supply exploded, prices warped, fortunes shifted overnight. His pilgrimage to Mecca was supposed to be an act of devotion and diplomacy. A public announcement that Mali was not some distant rumor, but a powerful Islamic empire. He wanted scholars in Cairo to respect him. He wanted Mediterranean merchants to remember his name. They did. His generosity vaporized fortunes, reshaped trade routes, and taught a brutal lesson. Money is not neutral. Unleash too much of it, too fast in the wrong place, and you don't get gratitude. You get chaos. In a world wrestling with billionaires, sovereign funds, and central banks that can summon trillions with a keystroke, the story of Mansa Musa isn't just exotic trivia. It's a warning label from the 14th century. To understand what Musa did to Cairo, you have to understand what he controlled back home. Start in the forests south of the Sahara, in the secret goldfields of Bambuk and Bure. There, miners sifted riverbeds and pits, coaxing glittering dust from the mud. They weren't Malians. They weren't Muslims. They hid their locations and refused outside control. So Mali invented a workaround. Picture a quiet riverbank at dawn. Malian merchants arrive, unload slabs of desert salt, copper, and cloth. They place the goods on the ground and walk away. Hours later, the miners emerge from the trees. They sprinkle piles of gold dust beside the goods and disappear again. No words, no contracts. If the Malians are satisfied, they take the gold and leave. If not, they wait for the piles to grow. Silent trade, they called it, a system that moved tons of gold without a shared language or shared trust. Over that river of gold, the Mansa laid a simple, ruthless rule. All gold nuggets belong to the crown. Only dust can circulate among the people. Commoners bought and sold with pinches of dust, weighed on delicate balances. Nuggets, bars, and big chunks. Those went straight to Musa's treasury. It was genius. By hoarding the big pieces, he prevented gold from becoming too common at home, kept prices stable, and built personal reserves on a scale that's hard to grasp. Modern guesses put his net worth at the equivalent of $400 to $500 billion. But it wasn't just gold. North of the savannah, deep in the Sahara, lay Taghaza, a town built almost entirely from salt. Houses were sharp-edged blocks of rock salt stacked like bricks. The water was foul. The air burned your lungs. From this hellscape, slaves hacked out huge slabs and loaded them onto camels. In the heat of Mali, salt could be worth its weight in gold. People needed it to live, to work, to replace what the sun stole from their bodies. Musa controlled that too. Salt went south, gold went north. Mali sat in the middle, taxing everything that moved. The empire stretched from the Atlantic to the edge of modern Niger, a landmass larger than Western Europe. So when Musa decided to go on Hajj, he didn't travel like a pilgrim. He traveled like an empire on legs. The numbers boggle the mind. Chroniclers talk of up to 60,000 people. Soldiers, scribes, storytellers, judges, cooks, water bearers, animal handlers. 12,000 slaves, each dressed in silk and brocade imported from Persia. Their clothes alone outclassed most European nobles of the time. At the vanguard marched 500 slaves with gold staffs, gleaming in the sun. Each staff weighed around 2 to 3 kilos. They served no practical purpose. They were walking billboards that screamed, "We have more gold than we know what to do with." Behind them came the gold train, 80 to 100 camels, each groaning under about 130 kilos of gold dust. Sacks packed with fine, shimmering powder, not coins, not bars. Dust that could slip through your fingers like sand, and yet could buy kingdoms. Alongside Musa rode his senior wife, Inari Conte, with a personal entourage of 500 maids and slaves. Somewhere deep in the desert, she complained she felt filthy, that she missed the rivers of Mali. So Musa did what a man who thinks in infinite resources does. He ordered his men to dig a giant trench in the sand, line it with stones, and pour in precious water until it formed a private pool. In the middle of one of Earth's harshest deserts, while thousands around him rationed every drop, the richest man alive made a swimming pool so his wife could feel clean. That mindset would follow him to Cairo. The caravan's route threaded through a chain of oases, Niani to Walata, over the bleak salt town of Taghaza, then north to the green ribbons of Tuat, and finally down toward the Nile. Moving that many people across the desert wasn't a stroll. It was a military-grade operation. Wells could be drained dry. Animals could collapse. Timing meant survival. Every Friday, Musa demanded congregational prayer, no matter where they were. Legend says he built a mosque every week along the way. More likely, his architects assembled an elaborate traveling mosque, tents or wooden frames that rose and fell with the caravan. A mobile cathedral of canvas and prayer, moving through a sea of sand. By July 1324, the dunes gave way to stone. The caravan crested a final rise and saw it, the green thread of the Nile, the jagged triangles of the pyramids, and beyond them, the shining city of Cairo. Musa pitched his tents near Giza. His camp sprawled across the sands like a second city. To the Mamluk authorities, it looked less like a pilgrimage and more like an army. Protocol demanded that any visiting ruler come to the citadel and bow, literally kiss the ground, before the Sultan, al-Nasir Muhammad. Musa hesitated. He told the emir sent to escort him, "I am here only for the pilgrimage." But everyone understood the real issue. Mansa Musa was no minor prince. In his own lands, he was the one people bowed to. Kissing another man's floor would make him look like a vassal. Eventually, under pressure, he agreed to go. The court lined the audience hall. The Sultan waited on his raised throne. The order rang out. "Kiss the ground." Musa refused. Silence. The richest man in the world stood in the capital of the Islamic world and said no. Then he found a loophole. "I make obeisance only to God who created me," he declared. And he prostrated himself, fully face to the floor, but framed as prayer to Allah rather than submission to al-Nasir. The visual protocol was satisfied. The pride of both men stayed intact. Impressed, the Sultan broke his own rules and invited Musa to sit beside him. Not below, beside. Symbolically, the king from the gold lands of the West had entered the club of equals. And then the gifts began. Musa unloaded gold like it was sand. 50,000 dinars worth to the Sultan alone. Loads upon loads to the emirs, officers, judges, scholars. He left no court emir nor holder of a royal office without the gift of a load of gold, remembered one Karimi. In the streets, his people scattered alms to beggars, showered mosques with donations, and paid absurd sums for goods. They were unfamiliar with local prices and believed their wealth inexhaustible. Picture a Cairo merchant selling a slave girl worth 10 dinars. A Malian strolls in, eyes his wares, and without bargaining throws down 100. Word spreads like fire. By the third day, every merchant in Cairo knows the Black King's people will pay anything. Prices explode. Gold is money in Cairo. The dinar and mithqal aren't just coins, they're the yardstick of value. When Musa floods the city with raw gold, that yardstick stretches. Before Musa, 1 mithqal of gold might fetch about 25 silver dirhams. After Musa, it drops below 20. In modern terms, the gold in your safe just lost around 12% of its value. If you're a Mamluk noble sitting on piles of gold jewelry, your net worth just shrank. If you're a merchant selling grain, your prices lurch upwards as the value of the coin in people's hands melts away. Al-Umari, a bureaucrat who arrived 12 years later, still heard the complaints. Gold was at a high price in Egypt until they came in that year, his informants told him. Its value fell and has remained cheap till now. Modern historians argue over how extreme the crash really was, but to people living it, the storyline was simple. The king of Mali came with too much gold, and the rules changed. Here's where the story twists. For all his reserves, for all his swagger, Mansa Musa didn't calculate one thing: the burn rate of a gigantic entourage in a foreign market designed by professionals. By the time he finished his Hajj in Mecca and wound his way back to Cairo for the return trip, Musa had a problem. The king of gold was out of gold. His caravan still needed food, water, animals, guides. The desert did not care about his reputation. So the richest man alive did something almost nobody imagines him doing. He went to the bankers. In Cairo, the Karimi merchant cartel watched the whole spectacle with cold eyes. They were the financial engine of the Red Sea trade, the people even sultans borrowed from. One of their leaders, Siraj al-Din ibn al-Kuwaik, extended Musa a massive loan, reportedly around 50,000 dinars. The terms were brutal. One chronicler claimed the merchants made 700 dinars profit on 300. That's an effective interest rate that would make a modern payday lender blush. Think about the symbolism. The man whose gold just warped the market now sat across from professional moneymen, negotiating rates like any indebted prince. The resource king stepped into the world of credit and immediately lost. To secure the loan, Musa pledged the future output of the Mali goldfields. He promised to send back dust, caravans of it, to clear the debt. But there was an unintended side effect. When he borrowed those huge sums, he didn't conjure new gold. He sucked gold out of Cairo's circulation and into his own hands again. Suddenly, supply tightened. Prices started to creep back up. One man's borrowing nudged the entire gold market in reverse. Then when he returned home and began paying the loan back with shipments of dust, the market felt another pulse of gold, another downward tug on price. Waves from a single pebble rippling across the Mediterranean economy. By the time Musa set off into the Sahara again, he carried less cash, more obligations, and invisible chains of international finance wrapped around his empire. The desert showed him no mercy. On the way home, the caravan shrank. People died of thirst when wells failed. Others froze when desert nights dropped below freezing. Pack animals collapsed under loads. Some accounts suggest as many as a third of his followers never made it back. Somewhere in that deadly expanse, a banker's agent, sent by Siraj al-Din to oversee repayment, collapsed and died. The loan was so big, the journey so crucial, that the head of a major financial house later sent his own son to Mali to collect. Yet Musa didn't return empty-handed. In Mecca, he had met Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a poet and architect from Al-Andalus. Musa paid him around 200 kilos of gold to come west. Back in Mali, al-Sahili helped shape the Jinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu, refining local mud brick techniques with Mediterranean ideas. Musa also brought home books, jurists, and astronomers. He expanded the Sankor complex in Timbuktu into a full university town, where tens of thousands of students would study theology, law, mathematics, and astronomy. The gold that crashed Cairo built libraries in the Sahel. 50 years after Musa's caravan rolled through Cairo, a Jewish cartographer on the island of Majorca dipped his brush into pigment and redrew the world. On his Catalan Atlas of 1375, Abraham Cresques filled the blank interior of West Africa with an image that would haunt European imaginations. A dark-skinned king, seated on a throne, wearing a golden crown and robes, a scepter in one hand and a gleaming nugget in the other. The caption reads, "This black lord is called Musse Melly, lord of the black people of Guinea. So abundant is the gold found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king in all the land." For European princes, that map wasn't just decoration, it was an invitation. If there was a river of gold flowing somewhere south of the Sahara, they wanted it. Within a century, Portuguese ships began edging down the Atlantic coast of Africa, searching for that wealth. The spectacle of Mansa Musa, a king so rich he could crash an economy by accident, turned West Africa from a vague rumor into a concrete target. His Hajj worked. The Islamic world recognized Mali as a great empire. Scholars came, trade intensified. Timbuktu shone as a center of learning. But visibility is a double-edged sword. By putting his wealth on display, Musa lifted his people into the story of the wider world. He also helped set the stage for future outsiders to treat that same wealth as something to be captured and controlled. Today, when we talk about trillion-dollar markets, about a handful of people holding more wealth than entire countries, about central banks wrestling with the consequences of printing or tightening money, echoes of Musa's story are everywhere. He reminds us that wealth isn't just a number on a list, it's power over other people's realities. Pour too much of it into a system, too fast, without understanding how that system works, and generosity can feel like invasion. Prices warp, fortunes vanish. Resentment lingers. In 1324, a king rode east with camels full of gold dust and a simple intention: honor his faith and show the greatness of his realm. Along the way, he discovered a hard truth. Even the richest man in history couldn't break the laws of economics. But for a brief, dazzling moment, he bent them, and the world has been tracing the consequences ever since.